Okay, so let's move into our lesson for tonight. Tonight we're talking about sin. That's the old story. Somebody asked, did you go to church today? Oh yeah, never miss. Okay then, what did the preacher talk? What did he preach on? He said that pulpit thing. No, what was the topic? Sin, and he was against it. Sin. We very tightly define sin sometimes, but sin is bigger than many times we try to define it ourselves. There's a lot of attitude issues that become sin. There's a lot of word pictures, and we're going to look at it. We're going to look at the Hebrew words and what they're defined as. Then we will look at some of their uses, the Hebrew and the Greek, in the Old and New Testament tonight. But in my mind, sin is an attitude, or any attitude, of indifference to God, of unbelief in God, of disobedience to the will of God, as revealed in our conscience, law, or gospel. Whether you express this attitude through word, deed, or just your disposition and your conduct. Now, put that in simple terms as parents, how many of us have told our kids that not telling the whole story is the same as a lie? We've all said it, or most of us have. They said, well, I just didn't tell everything. Well, then you lied. No, I didn't. I didn't lie. I didn't say that. But you deceived, and that became a lie. Anytime we do things with an intent to satisfy self and not God, we're in a state of sin. And so that's what we're going to look at and study tonight. So let's look at some of the words. I hope you don't mind the words. Again, I remind you, we're going to do this pretty much every week because as she found out with eternal life, it leads you to all these different scriptures. And the Hebrew and the Greek have lots of different definitions for our one word sin, but it uses it differently. Robert?
Just wanted to clarify what you just said. You just said that things we do for ourselves to make us happy.
No.
What
Don't take it to the extreme. I'm saying when we are considering self more than God. God wants you to be happy.
Yeah.
He wants us to experience life and have it more abundantly, correct? But I'm just talking about when you're taking care of me supplants God. It's fine for you to take a day off from doing church work. I do it occasionally. It's fine to just do something for yourself or your family. Because those things, one, reinvigorate you, revitalize you. It also draws your family closer together. But it's just like our overall walk with God in other ways. It's when your path starts veering off that you're going into sin. Okay, so don't too tightly define me on being good to self. Okay? That's just like, the thing we mentioned a little bit this morning. You can be rich and be godly, or you can be rich and be miserly and sinful. It's how you approach the riches that God's blessed you with. What do you do with them? So, first word in the Old Testament is hatath, and it means it's a missing or an offense. Now, what's an offense? Well, what do they call it when you're speeding? That's an offense. Go ahead, Pam.
I said anything that's forbidden.
Okay. So breaking a rule, I heard another voice.
Violation.
It's a violation, right. So the first one is a missing of the things that are important, or doing what you should, or a violation of God's word. Pasha is then rebellion and transgression. Now, how does an offense differ from a rebellion? When the word willfully is added to it. There are many times I will catch myself speeding, but I don't mean to. But if I say, you know what, I know that there's no cops on this strip of road ever, and I put my foot down, then I become willful in my violation. I'm still going to get a ticket either way. And we still have to account to God for our sin either way. But there's a very big difference in both God's understanding and our intent when we do it accidentally. I don't know if that's the right word. Sins of omission versus commission. All right? Awan it's a perversion. Now, what is a perversion? And don't start naming bad things.
Something that's different than what we would consider as normal.
Something that's different from the normal. I think, take it a little further, something that twists the normal. Iniquity, of course, again, just another word we use for sin. Ra is evil. Now, if something is just evil, what is it?
It has no redeeming qualities. It's always wrong.
Okay. Well, what's the difference in evil and bad?
As I feel as though a lot of a big thing in Hollywood right now is taking notoriously evil people and showing their backstory makes it justified in what they're doing. And they're doing this so, you can make evil look less worse. But the fact is, evil is evil. If you're doing something, even if someone did you wrong, you doing something that has no redeeming qualities is still evil. It doesn't matter if, you were twisted as a kid or whatever. I mean, that's one of the things that we talk about a lot as teachers is a lot of our kids we teach have very bad home lives. But, we have to work with that, but at the same time, you still have to act a certain way in polite society. So.
In Jeremiah this morning, in chapter 23, weren't you? One of the last verses we looked at before class ended was about the false prophets who were intentionally providing false prophecy. They were claiming to dream dreams, which the text seems to indicate they were making up these dreams. They were giving prophecies, which textually it's saying these were not prophecies of God. These were prophecies of their own making. Is that bad or is that evil?
Evil.
Why is it evil, Bruce?
It's intentional. It's similar to what Hal is saying. It's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things. Their intention is evil. Their heart is evil. They intend to go against God. They intend to elevate themselves, not God. It's a lot of things.
And there is a difference. And I'm so glad God knows our heart.
Amen.
I've said things from the pulpit, mistakes, hopefully always small. And I've been called and said, why do you say that? Why do you believe that? I had that happen this morning. A question about whether Jesus, the first time he met him was when he said fishers of men. And it wasn't. Go back to John 3. But, I can say things wrong. God knows the intent of my heart. If I make an honest error in poor study, poor memory, hey, because I got surgery coming up, I've got 6 weeks worth of sermons on my desk. You try and keep them straight. I told Allison I was 1 point ahead all morning on my clicker. I couldn't seem to get in sync with myself. So there's a difference in evil and bad. Sin is bad. All sin is bad. But God knows the intent and the purpose of your life and your heart. And you better praise God for that. Because it is the only way we can survive the blood of Jesus and God knowing the intent of my heart when I sin.
Would you say that evil is non-redeemable like you talked about, but something that is bad may be able to be redeemed?
I think anything can be redeemed short of Satan and his angels. I think anyone can be redeemed as long as there's breath within them.
Do you have an example? I'm just curious.
John Wayne Gacy, the church in Milwaukee, when he was in prison there, studied with him. It was John Wayne Gacy, wasn't it?
No,
Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer. The church up, and I think it was Hollis. Studied with him, baptized him in prison. He spends the rest of his life in prison, but an evil cannibal was redeemed. So the only question that remains was he truly redeemed? Or was he doing something? Well, that's up to God. That's not up to me. I accept on face value. So yes, I think evil can be redeemed. Truest evil, evil in the truest sense, probably not. But human evil can always, has an opportunity until you die. I remember we at philosophy class at Lipscomb, that came up was, somebody makes a deathbed confession, they get baptized minutes before they die, and did they really mean it? Did they have a chance? And the professor let us go for an hour or so, or maybe a couple of days on it, and then he said, bottom line is, you're not God. So, and I remember him saying, it's none of your business. God will deal with God's business. Your job is to teach and preach and baptize them when they want to be baptized. Forgive them when they need forgiveness. Let God handle His business, Robin.
I think something that's important about that story about Dahmer is the fact that, if I remember right, he didn't even try to. He knew what he did landed him in prison, and he didn't even try to get out. Whereas there are many prisoners who try to use the fact that they got baptized and whatnot to say to their appeals court and stuff, "Oh, I'm changed now," and that's not a Christian heart.
No.
A Christian heart says, "I give me as much penalty as whatever the law says I need to get. I shouldn't get out early, and I deserve what I did." And so I think those are things that define, am I doing something as outwardly, or am I doing something, a change in my heart? And I think, if I remember right, I never read the book, but I know I've talked to people who have. I think that was part of it that was very defining of him, was that he got baptized and he accepted the fact, I'm going to live the rest of my life in prison.
And I've always heard he was faithful until he was murdered in prison. Okay, in the New Testament as well, we have some Greek words here. Katie, we're looking at words for sin, different words. And so, hamartia is just missing the mark. Now, I want you to notice there's going to be a little bit shift in the severity of words from the Old Testament to the New one. Jeremiah, that's a severe book. I mean, they have been evil. They're almost unredeemable in God's sight. The words are stronger. The words are more cutting. And our basis is transgression. Adikia, unrighteousness. Now, what is unrighteousness? Ungodly. Simple explanation, you're not living right anymore. You're unright living. Asabea, it's impiety or wickedness. Impiety, if a person is pious, what are they?
They're uppity.
They're good. In a theological sense, when you hear the word pious, it's a person that's heart is turned towards a devotion towards God. Impiety then is not that. Yeah. Not good. Anomia, it's contempt and violations of the law. Now, there's violation and there's contempt. And it goes back to the willful. But more than just willful, what does contempt mean?
Let me give you an example. If we look back at Leviticus, we have 5 chapters where God says, this is unintentional, this is unintentional, this is unintentional. And then Nadab and Abihu offer strange fire to God, and he kills them immediately. He knew the difference.
I hate that story, by the way.
Okay.
Well, no, I hate it because it's like, that is one of those instances where it's like, human me, really, God? But it was the contempt factor. They knew they had been drilled in how they were to light that fire probably every day of their lives, or at least every day of their working lives as priests. And now, they're like, nobody will ever know the difference.
But Uzzah, the same, your argument's the same way, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Uzzah's another bad one. Uzzah tried to do right, but now, Uzzah was not contempt. Nadab and Abihu showed contempt for God because they did what they knew to be wrong and tried to hide it, secretly do it. Uzzah tried to do right and disregarded. He violated the law, and he paid the price. The price was still the same. Porneia, it's depravity, from which our word pornography comes. Depraved means lacking, missing. So what if someone is involved in this sort of sin? What's lacking? What are they missing? Huh? Conscience, morals,
An understanding of God.
an understanding. Yeah.
And they're focused on self.
Again, yeah, back to that self thing. They're focused on self in an ungodly way. Epithumia, it's a desire for what has been forbidden. Specifically, that word goes into the lust. Again, about me. So, sin is, we're going to look at some verses here. Romans 14:23. Whatever is not from faith is sin. It's a violation of conscience. Now this is where y'all start talking. Give me an example of violating your conscience. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to tie one on Saturday night, and then I'm going to rip around town. I'm going to knock over mailboxes. That was my friends in high school, not me. Not that. Let's talk about a good person violating their conscience. I don't have an example, so y'all better come up with one.
Just deliberately missing worship service. And the more you do it, the more your conscience doesn't bother you.
That's where it talks about you sear your conscience. Yeah, it starts off.
Just a time here and a time down the road.
And it may not have been a bad reason the first time.
Yeah.
I've told the story. Allison and I just flat skipped church one Sunday night in Germany. And about half the church showed up and knocked on our door and says, "Hey, we thought we'd come by and get you to go out for ice cream." They climbed a mountain to get to our house. We lived up on the side of a mountain. And they walked about 150 yards up from our garage. It was that bad. But see, they were making sure that we did not let that become habit. That's a violation of conscience. You know it's wrong, you do it anyway.
You know, one that many times we get into, we go to work, and we may have a boss who's saying something to a customer or something else that we know is not right. And so we look at that and we say, well, I have to do my job. Really? You have to be a Christian first.
Had somebody here that a long time ago approached me and said, as far as a way of dressing for worship, I'll just leave it at that, personal appearance for worship. And they said, I really think I should do this thing, but I'm uncomfortable with it. Well, what does your conscience say? Well, I think I should. Then what should you do? I should do it. They never did. Now, that's not to say that they're sinful, because they may have studied themselves, because I gave them some scripture to think about along with their thought process there. But did they continue to violate their conscience? And this is not a big deal, I don't think, for God in this, but this one's not. But did they violate their conscience? Did they study themselves out of it? I don't know. But it can be the smallest thing. We need to watch that. Sin is also knowing to do good and not doing it. James 4:17. So give me an example. Crystal's got one right on the tip of her tongue. I saw her face.
Well, that is a verse that gets me every time, because every time I know I need to do something good and I'm tired, and then that verse comes into my head. It just convicts me every time. Could be helping somebody who needs help. Oh, I'm really tired, I've worked all day. He who knows what to do and doesn't do it, for him is sin. Okay, I'm going, that's kind of how it goes with me.
So then what do we say to ourselves when we decide not to go? I'll tell you what I say is like, they don't know how tired I am.
Yeah.
They don't know what all I've done this
I
week.
need a break,
Yeah.
that's what I say, yeah.
So, knowing, okay, I did it this afternoon, I'll confess. I had to go pick up the church bus. This makes it even worse, because I'm driving a bus with a great big sign on the side that says Freeport Church of Christ. I'm going to Walmart to pick it up and pass a young woman carrying a baby on her hip. out there in the middle of nowhere, between the fairgrounds and up here. But a car, I'm with Allison at this point, a car whips over in front of us, does a U-turn. I said, oh, it's okay. They're going to pick her up. We're going the other way. When I came back, she's still walking. And so I went wide so I wouldn't hit her with the bus and kept going. And I felt bad. Once I got here, I thought, what would it have taken me to give her a ride? But here's how I justified it. I said, oh, but in today's society, I'm in here alone, a guy, this is a young woman. Boy, somebody could really, ruin my chance to be in the Supreme Court, and I don't want that to happen. They're liable to call me any day. And, we justify for right or for wrong. Now, that's not a bad reason to say, I'm not going to put myself in a position alone with a young woman. But at the same time, I was really just justifying to myself why I didn't. And that process goes quick, doesn't it? Boy, it's like, in our brain, okay, I'm good. I didn't have to do it anyway.
The exact same thing, but I know there's one instance where you drove past me, and probably the one time I actually did it, where I actually stopped and helped somebody, and you praised me about it for a long time, and it's funny because now I will pass that, and similar things go through my head, like, when I'm on the side of the road, I don't want to stop because I know Kayla has mentioned before, like being intimidated by a guy that just comes up, because people in society don't do that anymore. So they automatically assume you're not there to help. So it's, I don't know, stuff like that's hard for me because I don't want to come off as like creeping them out.
But
we want to be helpful.
we are supposed to be gentle as a dove, but also as wise as a serpent. There are times that we have to use good common sense in, I don't want to get shot by some old lady that gets scared that I go up to her window. So if I do pull over, I stay way back and say, ma'am, do you need help? Can I call somebody for you? And usually it's like my wife's in the car, it's all good, but
That's tough today, with cell phones, because I used to stop all the time.
yeah.
And if they said that they had somebody come in or whatever, then that was fine. But I've been threatened, get away, I'll call the police, I'm going to call. And all I did was stop to help, and so I got discouraged from doing it because of that.
It's a sad commentary on our society that everyone's out to get us.
There's a lot of scary stuff in the news these days.
Yeah, there is.
The sex trafficking, it's child slavery.
There's a lot of bad stuff out there, and so we have to use common sense. We're not always going to be able to do. Go with me to Haiti one time. Look at all the need around you, and you can't do it all. You've heard me say, Bruce, I think, was with me on this one. We had to make a decision that may well have killed a man because we could not afford to pay for his surgery. Our justification was what we're doing with this money is going to help lots of children and a whole church, and that's all we got. We have to do what people entrusted us to do with it. But it still bothers me inside because he may well have died because he did not have that gangrenous limb removed. I don't know. Sin is a violation or breaking of God's law. 1 John 3:4. Sin is lawlessness. That one's self-explanatory. We don't need a lot of, we know what this one means. And sin is a failure to keep God's commands. 1 John 5:17. All unrighteousness, all unright living is sin. Now, Bruce mentioned people worshiping Baal. Did you know the Baal religion, Baal worship has made a comeback in the Middle East? There is a large sect of people that are worshiping Baal again. And you would think if you had read what God did, well, clearly they don't care what God said. They don't believe our God has that sort of power. Now, we've been reading Jeremiah, and we have no problem connecting the downfall of Israel at that time with their sin. Heard me say this before. Brother Luckner insists that Haiti's financial condition, Haiti's extreme poverty, Haiti's extreme illness issues is because they worship Satan to be freed from slavery. Rather than accept slavery, they accepted voodoo or practiced voodoo until it was the largest religion in Haiti. And he insists God has cursed us. Now here's my thing. When he asked me, what do you think? I said, you know what? I can show you a whole lot more scriptures to show that God does do that than I can show you that God won't do it today. I don't know. I can't answer the question. But I believe God is capable when a people go so far astray. And what it did do is when there was a revival back towards God again. And voodoo is not the largest religion anymore. Still up there. It's number 3 or 4. But
All you have to do is look through history and see every major civilization, when it got way too far away from God, went down the deep end real quick. And I mean, there's a million reasons why, but there's also a million ways God can do it. So it just, I mean, you just march through history, you can see all of it. They're not, I wouldn't say they always were God-centered societies, but when they got truly amoral, they no longer were, God wiped them out.
So, let's look at some word pictures. All these verses, we're not going to look them all up, but all these verses are talking about sin as a putrefying disease. Okay, we got a doctor with us. Hey, doctor, tell us what a putrefying disease is. And we want pictures.
I've got pictures.
No.
It typically results in a loss of blood flow. That's usually where it starts. Or it starts with bacteria or virus or fungus first, but it damages the blood supply so the immune system can't come in there and help. So you've been cut off and it just rots.
Yeah, that's the word I was waiting to hear. It rots. The flesh. And there's nothing, if you've been near it, there's nothing worse. You can smell it and it stays with you. It's horrendous. And my dad had gangrene of his gallbladder. And when they opened him up, it was horrible. Even, after the surgery, that smell was still there. It was disgusting. We've seen it with many of us have dealt with cancer patients. There's a smell in the later stages. It's putrefying. That's what sin is. As disgusting as that sounds, that's what sin is in your life to God. Now, our God says our worship is a sweet aroma. Our sin is the opposite, as far opposite as it can be. So when we sin, it is a putrefying smell to God. He hates it. You can't use the word strong enough. He hates it. Leprosy, a good example of that. Now, I will say this. There was a time, 1st century and before, in which I believe there were many diseases that were sin-related. I know we have sin-related diseases today, but sin-related or demonically related. I am not comfortable saying we have demonically related disease issues today. I don't know that I can go there. I do believe there's demonic influence in the world. Clearly there is. And I think in certain cultures it exerts a stronger influence than ours. But I'm not convinced, there's a book not too many years ago that described that paranoia and epilepsy and all these things were demonic issues. I don't believe that. I can't go there. There are, just because of DNA, because of circumstances, there are diseases that take hold of us that have nothing to do with personal sin.
Can you say, exchange that word for lifestyle disease?
There are lifestyle diseases, absolutely.
Because that lifestyle is a choice, and talking on the subject of sin, it's about choice.
Now, that's still demonically influenced because Satan seeks ways to lure away God's people. And sexual sins, that's an easy one. It's an easy one. It gets a lot of people. Okay, sin is pictured as a heavy burden. Have you ever had something that's really worrying to you? I've had about 2 bad weeks now because of my dad. And I'm just consumed with, I don't know what word for it. And it's really, I've been severely depressed the last couple of weeks because of just worrying. I didn't sleep last night at all, thinking about it all night. It's a heavy burden. It weighs you. I mean, it physically feels like you're carrying a load sometimes. And notice, when we're carrying that load, we start to exhibit physical signs of it, don't we? We start feeling sick or weak or tired and so sin is that. It's look at Jesus when he bore the sins of the world. If you want to see a burden on somebody. It's pictured as a taskmaster. What's a taskmaster?
Boss.
Slave driver. Yeah, more than a boss. Well, you may have a really mean boss. I don't know your superintendent, but usually it's more, like she said, it's more like a slave driver. And so it's pictured as a hard taskmaster. The word servant, doulos, in Romans, it goes with this. If we remember the Egyptian leaders, taskmasters there. So how does sin become a taskmaster?
It could be an addiction.
So it could be an addiction.
I mean, addictions are definitely drive your life to wherever the addiction wants it to go.
If you have ever dealt, heroin's a big one. If you've dealt with someone addicted to heroin, don't believe a word they say until they have been clean for a long time. Because it will make them do anything to get that next fix. And they'll hurt anybody. Yeah, we hate to say it, we went through that here with Connor. And I just, in his face, I just said, "You're a liar. Quit lying to me." "No, I'm not." "You are." You had something?
Along with what...
You pointed at Bob. I didn't know what his
Bob
addiction
said,
was.
It's what drives you, is what I was going to say. And he said, he used that word drive.
It does. It drives you. Now, so we'll look at an affair. It drives you to keep it covered up, to not get caught. Embezzlement. We'll go with white-collar crime. Embezzlement. You work hard to hide it, cover it up.
Well, a great example we've talked about before a lot of times is David. Look how hard he tried to work to cover up what he was doing. It was like almost as though he was no longer in control. He was, but...
And he compounded sin with more sin, and more sin with more sin.
I'd say, one of the things that me and Kayla constantly talk about is how to make sure that everything I do at the school is above board money-wise.
Mhm.
Because she controls all the finances. And that's the biggest way a lot of companies where husband and wife, I deal with 7 accounts regularly, and it would be very easy for me, because we're now trusted, for me to get money. And so I do everything as much as possible above board. I don't, when somebody's getting paid actually to me, I make sure someone else signs for it, that it's, those very reasons, so we don't fall into, someone can even accuse us of that sin.
It's pictured as foolish insanity in these verses. And again, these verses, if you look them up, they're word pictures of it. And it will be online, by the way, after tonight. You can download the slides and look up the verses if you'd like to on PowerPoint. But it's pictured as a foolish insanity. What is a foolish insanity? I'll do it in mama talk. You have lost your cotton picking mind. That's what mom would say to me. And she'd just stare at me and shake her head. It's like, what is wrong with you, boy? Well, foolish insanity, you've lost your mind.
It doesn't make any kind of sense.
No.
In a real world.
And so, Katie,
Doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
that's the definition of insanity. And so when we continue to sin against God and think we're going to either get away with it, last verse, or last word, or we are going to get a different result. Yeah. God is not to be mocked. Remember, he says that. Don't try and mock me. Now, again, I've got a little disclaimer at the bottom. This is not, I'm not talking about a person with a mental disease. Most of us have known people with, let's say, paranoid schizophrenia or something, and it drives them to do things that are against, well, Alzheimer's. A few generations down my family with it. It drives men who were gospel preachers for 50 years to say things they would never have said. Well, that's different. That's totally different. A disease or deficiency there. This is, you're a person of your right mind and you just do stupid stuff because you can't help yourself. And it makes no sense. It's defiling. Now, what is defiling? Somebody theologically, ritualistically, Old Testament, what were things that defiled?
Pork,
Pork would defile you.
not washing your hands.
Cleanliness laws.
In your dead body.
Dead bodies. See, those were things that carried a risk of disease that could spread and hurt others. Now,
Cloven hooves or uncloven?
can't hear you.
Is it uncloven or cloven hooves? That
Uncloven.
uncloven.
Yeah, you can eat a cow.
Yeah, so uncloven.
But don't eat camel. It's gross. But anyway, defiling sin then is sin that will come into the camp. And it not only ruins your life, which it starts there, but like disease, it spreads.
Pollutes.
It pollutes. One bad apple. And it can spread within the church, within a community, wherever.
We see this with Achan, as he took the things, and then at the next battle, many other people were killed because of his sin. They didn't know about it, but it still defiled the whole king.
Use something that's currently in the news. The Me Too movement. No woman should ever be forced or coerced to do something that she doesn't want to. Clearly, as Christians, we believe that. We believe that, the sanctity of marriage, etc. But with this Justice, Brett Kavanaugh, a woman's made an accusation. The only reason there's argument about that is because there have been some that make false accusations, therefore prove it. And there's been some really stellar seeming stand-up guys that have done this and shocked everyone, so now he has to prove it. If people lived godly lives, when someone says, this happened to me, we would believe them. If someone does it, they would admit it. And we could believe them. But that's the situation we're in now. Because you don't trust anybody anymore. You just can't trust anybody. All right. It's a binding debt. How is it, Bruce?
I would add this too. When you look at Jeremiah, they started protecting evil. And in chapter 23, one of the things the false prophets were doing was they were encouraging the evil doers. They were encouraging them. And I would say there's a lot of that. In my lifetime, I remember things you would never say publicly or never do. And I'm seeing it now as a way of life publicly. And so I think we have moved in my lifetime to encourage evil doing. And so now, men like you just spoke of, I look guilty because now I'm placed in a group of people that have done this stuff.
I'm going to disagree with you just in our lifetime because sin cycles.
Sure.
And if we look at ancient Greek and Corinthian culture, I've been in Corinth, they were awful hedonistic society. Very open with their sin, very open with their, and I mean, it was a bad place. I think it cycles in many societies, and we're on a down cycle in ours. What will bring it back? Where will it go in our lifetime or our children's lifetime? It's scary, isn't it? But we're running out of time.
I think it's always present. It's just certain cultures sweep it under the rug.
Yes.
And hide it much better. I mean, I think that's back to what you were saying about that situation. And 35 years ago, it was more of a sweep it under the rug, which is why no one was able to say, well, prove it, because if it were now, I feel as if that person would have come forward. It's a much different world.
And we're in a world that they're very open about.
Yeah.
doing wrong things.
Yeah, so it's much more
immoral.
open now, whereas it was happening 50, 60 years ago, it just was being swept under the rug.
Got a couple more word pictures that we see in there. For the sake of time, we'll move through them fairly quick. But it's a blemishing stain. It's something that ruins, that discolors. You know, that's what a blemish is on a painting or something. You know, it discolors it. It messes it up. Impenetrable darkness. What word picture from the Old Testament do we remember as impenetrable darkness? With the plague, I still, that's one of those that boggles. I can't imagine what that was like. Well, all the plagues. But that one, that's kind of a scary one when you think about it. So stay up tonight and think about that. This picture is from a news article. It was a number of years ago. I don't remember all the details of it. I looked it up, but I didn't spend time memorizing it. But anyway, a man owned a private dump, and cities were using his dump. But at some point, they decided that the smell and the view of it was just bad. So they said, you got to get rid of it. We paid you to get rid of it. And he said, the thing is, the city's bringing so much, we can't. It's impossible for us to get it out faster than you bring it in. And so they fought in court for, I think it was 5 years. And the court finally said, you know, they're right, you got to get rid of it. And he said, too bad. You guys broke me. I got nothing left. And he walked away and left the city with this garbage dump that they had to figure it out. You know, a super site or whatever they call it when they got to clean up. Our sin can be that way. It starts with one small thing. And then it just piles up on you. And before you know it, you've gone a long way from where you wanted to be, where you intended to be. So this week, you know, look at your daily lessons, read the scriptures. I hope you're enjoying the study, both personal and group.